Good afternoon. It's Monday, the 16th of September 2019, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me today in the studio, Patrick Henningsen from 21st Century Wire. Welcome to the programme, Patrick.
Great to be with you, Mike.
Well, we're going to get straight on with this Iranian attack on Saudi Arabia.
Was it Iran?
Good question.
Or was it Yemen? Let's have a look. This is the story that's dominating the headlines right now. Yemen has attacked two major Saudi oil production facilities in Abqaiq and Kuras. And let's just look at what the headlines are saying right now. And these are Saudi Aramco facilities, Mike. And Saudi Aramco is the consortium that handles almost all of Saudi's oil and gas production. And this is owned by the Saudi state right now. So drone attacks spark huge blaze, massive oil fire here. This is a huge disaster for the country of Saudi Arabia, and it's threatening to shut down a fairly large percentage of their output, which is also a significant percentage of the global oil output. Let's take a look. Of course, the likely characters have already weighed in. There's Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State, and you can guess what he said, Mike. You've foreshadowed that quite well. Iran did it, of course. But let's look at other news. Well, we actually have an admission here from the Yemeni head of the Yemeni forces. This is the resistance forces, what some people might regard as the rightful Yemeni armed forces. They've made this announcement that they are responsible for this attack on the Saudi oil facilities. This is the Brigadier General Yahya Sari, and he said Saturday that the air forces have carried out an operation dubbed Operation Balance of Deterrence 2. This is a 10-drone squadron on two Saudi Aramco plants in Abqaiq and Kuras. So that's the head of the Yemeni resistance forces, but some might again call this the rightful Yemeni military forces. This is around Sana'a in the northern half of the country. Of course, the southern half of the country is still being contested by Saudi and U.S.-backed forces, hoping to tear that part away from the country of Yemen. But let's take a closer look here at how the markets are reacting. This is pretty significant. Oil has jumped 10% over the last 24 hours, Mike. So no news of any announcement by Saudi Aramco. They're supposed to do 48-hour announcements. And how long is this crisis going to last? How long till these facilities get back online? This is unknown. There's satellite photos that have been released on social media right now that are basically saying, the damages varies depending on what reports you're looking at here, but it is significant. It is significant that if you look at the news, Saudi Aramco was floating an IPO. They're going public, basically, this company. This would make this the biggest company in the world if the IPO is successful. And so we've got something like, I don't know, a certain percentage of the company, 10% of the company. I'm not sure what they're going to be floating, but it was initial valuations around $2 trillion. This would be the biggest flotation on the stock market in history. Mm-hmm. So what's happened this weekend with these drone attacks on this facility would really call that into question, the viability of this company, the security of this company. Is this something that people want to invest in? This is a big, serious question here.
Okay.
So, moving on, let's look at how the media is reporting this. So, how is the media reporting this? Well, we're looking at the Thomson Reuters Foundation here. So they're saying, this is interesting, these headlines, bearing in mind what we just showed you, Kuwait says it's probing drone sightings over Kuwait, working with Riyadh, working with the Saudis. So this is what they're saying. So you can see where this narrative is taking us here. So we have this admission by the Yemeni forces, by Ansarullah, the Houthis, as they call them in the West. But here's what Thomson Reuters is pushing out. They're saying some Iraqi media outlets have said Saturday that the attacks on Saudi oil company facilities are coming from Iraq, which borders Kuwait. In addition to the flyovers over Kuwait that are in this particular report by Thomson Reuters. But Baghdad denies this on Sunday and has vowed to punish anyone using Iraq where Iranian-backed paramilitary groups wield increasing power as a launching pad for attacks in the region. So that is, look at the first line in this. It says some Iraqi media outlets. They don't say which Iraqi media outlets. They don't provide any links. This is Thomson Reuters Foundation. This is meant to be the top media organization in the world, basically. And if you cannot call this journalism. It's vague and it reads like a propaganda script. I'm going to say this bluntly, okay? So there is no evidence of any drones flying from Iran to attack these Saudi facilities. And yet you see this floated out immediately on a Reuters outlet. So this is interesting. So this is what they're basically trying to say here. So here's the map, and as you can see, there's Kuwait right there in the center there, the top end of the Persian Gulf. And what Thomson Reuters are basically positing here is that you have these drones that are in play, basically, one from Iran, and they're even saying Iraq as well. And they're basically saying they're flying over Kuwait to strike targets in Saudi Arabia. That's the conspiracy theory that's being floated.
By the mainstream media.
By the mainstream media, Mike. So, and again, this is meant to draw this conclusion, which is the same as Mike Pompeo's conclusion, immediately without looking at any evidence, only suppositions and rumor, but Iran did it. Basically, this is what Thomson Reuters is after. So I'm going to have to conclude, Mike, that this can only be one thing. Well,
fake news.
Fake news. So that's that's all it can be, Mike.
Well, indeed. But look, this narrative has been building for some time. So here's April 2018, and this is the National, and they begin this article by saying the Yemeni government, and they're talking about the Saudi-backed organization which Saudi Arabia, the UK, and the United States claims is the government of Yemen.
Which
and,
Yemeni government? That's the question.
This is, yeah, well, they are talking about the Yemeni government that they claim is the Yemeni government, which we have highlighted many times on this program. You have yourself, that is in fact not legitimate, but gets its legitimacy purely from the fact that Saudi Arabia, the UK, and the United States say that it's legitimate, but there are many, many reasons why it isn't. And they claim that Yemen is using Iran, says Iran is arming Houthis with drones, but when they say Yemen, they're talking about this Yemeni government that they are backing. Now, the BBC's coverage of this at about the same time, this is the type of drone that the BBC wants you to have in your mind whenever you hear about these drones from Yemen.
And that's not a Boko Haram drone, is it?
This is not a Yemeni drone. This is not a Boko Haram drone. This is not a Syrian rebel drone. That is a US or a UK. It looks like a Reaper or something similar.
A Reaper, a Predator model, very advanced.
Exactly.
And not the sort of thing that makeshift terrorist organizations can get their hands on.
Exactly. Right? So let's look at what Defense News says is going on. This is from from 2 years ago. Houthi rebels flying Iranian-made kamikaze drones into surveillance radars. And as you can see, what is the wingspan on that? Probably about 10 feet or so.
Not very big.
Not very big at all. Sits on a tabletop. It is a very small device. So, you know, what the BBC wants you to have in your mind is not the reality. Now, this report saying that Houthi rebels flying Iranian-made kamikaze drones doesn't make any comment about whether the Iranians were providing these directly or whether they were coming through intermediaries.
Or whether they're just parts being supplied or technology. It's clearly being assembled by the Houthis. Because it's not easy to smuggle whole drones in anywhere. There's going to be a degree of assembly and building.
Well, that is a very good question. How are these getting into Yemen? Perhaps they're coming across Straits of Hormuz or something. I'm not sure. But anyway, this is the type of drone that they're talking about. But the media in general really focusing on drones for quite some time now. So this is Boko Haram is back with better drones. This is the New York Times over the weekend. Nigeria's war against Islamist extremism group Boko Haram was supposed to be over by now. The president, a former military ruler was re-elected earlier this year, boasting about his progress battling Boko Haram. And they're saying that a full decade into the war, however, Boko Haram militants are still roaming the country with impunity. Their fighters now have more sophisticated drones than the military and are well armed after successful raids on military brigades. Again, Islamic insurgencies are being presented as having better equipment than the government, better drones than the government. The truth is that this Boko Haram situation has been a problem, and this is something that Maria Zakharova, the Russian foreign minister, highlighted nearly 2 years ago now. And we made the point that our old friends Boris Johnson and Priti Patel were in fact pumping I think £200 million into the fight against Boko Haram at the time.
That's not a staged photograph, is it?
No, not at all.
No, that's absolutely authentic.
No, and
looking concerned, and I love Boris looking pensive there. Was that when he was foreign secretary?
That is when he was foreign secretary.
And Patel looking very concerned.
And she was at the Department for International Development at the time. So this is Foreign Office money and DFID money going into Nigeria to deal with Boko Haram. It hasn't dealt with Boko Haram. Boko Haram seems to be better equipped now than it ever was. Well, the same goes in Syria. In fact, as Chinese media here reporting air defenses intercept rebels' drone attack in Syria's Latakia, and this was a rebel drone being fired or flown towards or at Syrian military defenses. And so what we see, Patrick, is this massive increase in the use of drones right across the region and into Africa as well.
Globally, really, if you want to be general about it, it's a global trend.
Absolutely, absolutely. But these are not the key point here. Well, one key point is that these are not the type of drones that the West is flying. And my point really here is that the mainstream media pushing this narrative that Iran is supplying drones into Yemen. Well, in fact, it's not Iran that's supplying drones into Boko Haram. Iran certainly isn't supplying drones to the Syrian rebels. There are supplies of drones going around all these groups, and
There's different people supplying it to different people.
Exactly.
So Israel could be involved in this game as well. The United States certainly can be involved in this, and we'll show you that why in a minute. A number of countries, unlimited amount of potential vendors for drones, basically, drone technology. But the point is, and here the point with Yemen and Saudi Arabia, and this was the headline story this week across all mainstream media, even if Iran supplied the Houthi rebels with drone technology, does that compare to the billions of dollars in weapons and arms that the United States is supplying to Saudi Arabia now since March 2015, since they've been prosecuting this illegal undeclared war of aggression against neighboring Yemen? We're talking about tens, hundreds of billions in terms of weapons, arms, resources, F-16s, bombs, munitions, targeting data from U.S. satellites to hit and to level one of the poorest countries on the planet. And so they're trying to equate that somehow with Iran allegedly supplying some makeshift drones, crude drones as you've shown, to the so-called Houthi rebels, Ansarullah, the Yemeni resistance, resisting an undeclared war of aggression by Saudi Arabia and its allies. So can you really equate those two things? Who is really trafficking weapons around the globe right now? And I'm going to have to point to this story here. This was up on, on Arms Watch. This is Diliana Gaetaniada, and this is part 3 in a 3-part series. Leaked arms dealers' passports reveal who supplies terrorists to Yemen. Parts 1 and 2 are just stunning, Mike. She gives forensic evidence showing how the United States, under the guise of the Department of Defense, through a myriad of contractors, has trafficked hundreds of millions of dollars of weapons in the last 2 years to ISIS. And there's proof given, forensic proof of this, to ISIS. Okay, so that's a bit of a problem, and ISIS in Yemen, of all places. So this is what's happened as a result of this. Arms Watch, this is her new organization, has been, DDoS has received a denial of service, distributed denial of service attack over the weekend because of this investigation. Here she is tweeting about it, and also calling for other journalists who want to get involved in this story to help spread it. So you can check her out on Twitter. So that's what's happening. And also, if you want to know a bit more on this, by the way, here's just a snippet from this article. Leaked documents include scanned passports of U.S., Saudi, UAE arms dealers and government officials. And this exposes for the first time an international weapons shipping network for arming militants in Yemen. We're talking about Al-Qaeda and Islamic State militants in Yemen, tracing Islamic State weapons in Yemen back to their suppliers, originally the U.S. Department of Defense paying the bill. Isn't that incredible? And if you want to know any more on this particular story, there's an interview up on 21st Century Wire right now with Diliana Gaetaniera, and she reveals all the details of this story. So you can check that out, plus links to her website at Arms Watch.
Okay, quick reminder that if you like what the UK Column does and you'd like to support us, then please head over to ukcolumn.org/community, where there are various options for helping out there. And a quick reminder that Ian R. Crane is continuing his tour of the UK, asking, is 5G safe? All events beginning at 7 o'clock for a 7:30 start. And well, Tuesday the 17th, tomorrow is the next one in Canterbury, and then on Wednesday in London, Thursday in Reading, and ending up on the 11th of October in Cardiff, and the rest of the dates there. More details at alternativeview.co.uk. Now, as we mentioned on Friday, Boris is in Luxembourg to meet Jean-Claude Juncker, who's still President of the European Commission for another week or two. And he is over there with Steve Barclay, who's the Brexit Secretary, and he's going to hold separate talks with Michel Barnier, who's the EU's chief Brexit negotiator. Now, Boris claims that he believes passionately that he's going to produce a deal at the end of the day and bring one back. And of course, if he does that, then he won't have to worry too much about this legislation that's been passed, which is going to compel him to try to extend Brexit even further. And if he can come back with a deal, then of course it puts the opposition parties on a bit of a, puts their backs against the wall, really, Patrick, as they try to find a way to actually not leave with a deal or without a deal, because of the, as the Liberal Democrats have stated once again at the weekend, they don't want to leave at all. But anyway, Boris wrote an article in the Telegraph yesterday, just before heading over there. He said that he's working flat out to reach a deal. He said, if we can make enough progress in the next few days, I intend to go to that crucial summit on the 17th of October and finalise an agreement that will protect the interests of business and citizens on both sides of the Channel and on both sides of the border in Ireland. I believe passionately that we can do it. So that's all good stuff. So that's going on today. Now, at the weekend, as I mentioned, the Liberal Democrats were holding their conference, and well, they invited the wonderful Guy Verhofstadt, who's leader of the Alliance of Liberals and Democrats for Europe in the European Parliament, to come and visit. And they very proudly presented him with a T-shirt which said "Bollocks to Brexit." This is the sort of language that you would expect from a top-flight political party in the UK. And
he looks like a very dynamic individual, a dashing politician, wouldn't you say, by EU parliamentary standards?
Oh, he absolutely is, extremely dashing. Now, he made some comments at the Liberal Democrat conference, which got some Twitter traffic over the weekend. Well, I want to start with this. Just have a listen to this. This particular segment wasn't really picked up over the weekend, but I think it's important, so listen to this.
So let us use this pro-European energy, not only to remain, I have to tell you, in Europe, but also to reform the European Union. Because I have one conviction. That Brexit happens is also a sign that this European Union needs to be modernized, needs to be more effective. We cannot continue, dear friends, with a Europe that is always acting too little and too late.
So, a reformed European Union. Now, over the weekend then as well, the other thing that was going on, there was David Cameron produces his memoir, and that was getting some media coverage at the weekend. Mostly, for example, The Guardian here, 5 things we learned from David Cameron's memoir, or the BBC, David Cameron, Boris Johnson backed leave to help career. So it was really an attack by Cameron. This is what the mainstream media was focused on out of the whole memoir, was the attack on Boris Johnson, Priti Patel, and so on. But what fascinating that Guy Verhofstadt talking about a reformed, that Britain should stay in the EU in a reformed European Union, because of course that was exactly David Cameron's position back in the run-up to the referendum on this. This was the document that he published, and he said the reforms we have secured in this negotiation have been agreed by all 28 EU leaders. This was the negotiation that he held in the 18 months leading up to the referendum. They are legally binding. It cannot be unpicked without our agreement and that of every other EU country. But he went on to say in the introduction to that document that the task of reforming the European Union does not end with this agreement, and I will continue to pursue the further reform that Europe needs. Now, of course, in the event he lost the referendum and he didn't get the opportunity to pursue those reforms. But the question is, what is the nature of the reforms that he was referring to? Because when most people think of reform of the European Union, they're thinking in terms of, well, we know it's a corrupt organization, we know that it's full of bureaucracy, we got to deal with these problems. That's the type of reform people think, because people are good-natured and they want to see things improve. But perhaps that's not the kind of reform that we're talking about. So let's listen to the next comment that Guy Verhofstadt made.
In the world order of tomorrow, the world order of tomorrow is not a world order based on nation states or countries. It's a world order that is based on empires. China is not a nation, it's a civilization, Han. India, you know it better than I do, is not a nation. There are 2,000 nations in India. There are 20 different languages that are used there. There are 4 big religions at the same time. It is the biggest democracy worldwide. The US is also an empire, more than a nation. Maybe tomorrow they will speak there more Spanish than English. I don't know what will happen. And then finally the Russian Federation. The world of tomorrow is a world of empires in which we, European and you, British, can only defend your interest, your way of life, by doing it together in a European framework and in the European Union.
So, doing it together in a European framework in the European Union, but the European Union has to be an empire because the New World Order is a world of empires. Therefore, Britain has to be a colony of the European Empire, and really we should be. So this is the type of reform that he's talking about, building an empire. This is what he wants. He, by the way, absolutely on the same page with the likes of Ursula von der Leyen, with the outgoing president Jean-Claude Juncker, with Donald Tusk and these types of people, and Federica Mogherini. They're all following the same type of ideology with respect to Europe. So they want to build an empire. This is the type of reform that they're talking about, not the type of reform that many people would imagine, which is dealing with bureaucratic corruption and so on. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, Patrick, but really, the Liberal Democrats pushing this out over the weekend as if it's something to be proud of. I'm not sure they were. I think they were perhaps a little surprised by the reaction. They shouldn't have been surprised by the reaction from people, but I think they were.
It's one thing to be pro-Europe, and a lot of people are pro-Europe, and that's an understandable position for a lot of people, but this is something beyond pro-Europe. This is pro-imperial Europe, and so that, like you said, it assumes that member states would be functioning in a vassal-like position with regards to the relationship with Brussels or Germany or whoever is running,
right,
whatever the industrial machine is that is really running the European Union.
So we'll just end with this that David Scott discovered over the weekend as well. He was just pretty shocked at the love, the doughy-eyed love being expressed by Ursula von der Leyen here for who, Patrick?
It's George Soros,
yes.
Soros, as they say in
yes.
Eastern Europe, Soros.
So we wanted to push that up just purely because the BBC, if you remember from last week's program, the BBC was so vociferous that we really should not be criticising this man and his activities at all. And anybody that is really a hard right, sitting on the hard right of the argument and can be discounted.
Yeah, because George Soros's activities and business interests and everything is completely unimpeachable. He has only the best at heart.
Absolutely.
For the world.
Absolutely right. Now, what's going on with Netanyahu? He's been over to the United States.
Well, Netanyahu's doing his whirlwind tour. Was in Britain recently, but he's been in the U.S., but he's also been in Sochi. He's trying to shore up his election coming up, a runoff of the election, so he is really communicating with the far right in Israel. He's pandering to literally as far right as you can go, even from the National Front, the Jewish National Front. So this is who he's hoping is going to carry him over the finish line in the Israeli election runoff. So this is an important part of this, Mike, is about what Israel gets from the U.S. Netanyahu is boasting to his electorate, saying that I have Trump in my back pocket. Trump has given us everything that we've asked for. They've moved their embassy to Jerusalem. We're annexing the West Bank. In fact, the Knesset had a cabinet meeting, Mike, just a few days ago, and it was held in the occupied territories of Palestine. So they're really pushing this hard, and so they're saying they're going to annex the West Bank. So how is Israel able to get what it wants, even directly through the U.S. government? And this is an article that I've published at 21stcenturywide.com just a few days ago. Israel directing policy through the U.S. Treasury, sanctioning Hezbollah's political allies in Lebanon, not just sanctioning Hezbollah, which is something that Israel wants the U.S. to do. Hezbollah doesn't threaten U.S. security, nor does Hamas for that reason. But they do threaten Israel's agenda in the region. So they're not only sanctioning Hezbollah, calling them a terrorist organization. They have a working majority in Lebanese parliament. This would be like, sanctioning Sinn Féin, calling them a terrorist political party, when in fact they've completely been integrated practically into the political establishment. So Hezbollah allies, so they break up the coalition in Lebanon. The U.S. is now looking at sanctioning the political allies of Hezbollah. Can you believe this?
Right.
So this is another way of achieving regime change without having to do it with hard military force, which clearly Israel doesn't want to do with Hezbollah, because they did last time try that in 2006, and it didn't end well for Israel. They were defeated by a much supposedly weaker on paper force, defeated quite badly, in fact, in 2006. So Israel's not looking forward to any kind of a war with Hezbollah, so this is how they're trying to dislodge them from power, using the U.S. Treasury Department to do it. And there's some pro-Israel Secretary of the Treasury, Steve Mnuchin. There's no surprise. He's hiding nothing with regards to his bias for Israel. And the lobby has elevated him as the most important person in the U.S. setup for Israel in the U.S. And also Sigal Mandelkar. She is the undersecretary in the U.S. Department of the Treasury, and she's also sanctioning U.S. individuals for going to Iranian conferences. These are political conferences where people are trying to build bridges between the two countries. So, but they're now doing that, and the FBI is basically visiting ex-U.S. officials, Michael Maloof, people that you see on the news quite frequently, alternative media. Maybe Philip Giraldi might be in that category. We spoke to Sander Hicks last week, and he was visited by the FBI. He's an author and an activist. He ran for Congress a couple of years ago, or last year. So that's what's going on. The U.S. Treasury is being used as Israel's outsourcing what it wants through the U.S. Treasury Department.
So BICOM this morning was reporting that Israel and the United States are about to do a bilateral defense pact. Is that again just Netanyahu preparing for election, or do you think there's any possibility that could actually be pulled off?
Both. That's a big announcement for Netanyahu going into the elections. Look, on paper we've signed a defense pact with the U.S. as if Israel needs a written defense pact with the United States. And of course, the U.S. is going to jump to its aid at any given opportunity. But will the U.S. jump to its aid if Israel starts a war as intentionally with the express intent of dragging the U.S. into it? By inking this down on paper, that raises the risk possibility of that type of scenario. And I'm just going to remind people, Mike, this is what happened in the run-up to World War I. You know, entangled alliances, people feeling obliged to defend people that they've signed defense pacts with, and so this can quickly snowball into a kind of escalation in a regional war where it just gets out of control at some point, and then 3 years later, everybody's scratching their head saying, what the hell happened? How did this start? So this has happened in history. It's a bad move by the U.S., of course, but I think it's completely politically driven and driven by the Israeli lobby, 100%.
Okay, so Israel playing games with respect to their territory and Palestinian-held territory, and also playing games with respect to Iran. But of course, in the UK, increasingly, we cannot criticise this. And here is Robert Jenrick, who is the Community Secretary. He was speaking, giving a speech to the Board of Deputies of British Jews over the weekend. And he was saying that the Jewish community have the unflinching support of Boris Johnson and him. He said that his his British wife was born in Israel, and he's visited many times, so he's well placed to say that Israelis are often the fiercest critics of their government's policies. But he then went on to talk about the support that the British government is providing to deal with anti-Semitism in this country. And of course, when we look at what's happened with the Labour Party in the last few months, we can see there's a conflation between anti-Semitism and criticism of Israel. And this becomes quite a dangerous thing at that point. I think you probably agree with that, Patrick, but he's talking about Lord Pickles and John Mann working together, coming from different political backgrounds, and working together to deal with this problem. And also the fact that Ed Balls has been made a co-chair of the UK Holocaust Memorial Foundation Advisory Board and so on. So we're seeing very big political and ex-political figures being moved into key positions to protect, to me, what looks like to protect the Israeli narrative on what's going on inside their country.
Sure. I mean, how many government departments do you need to police anti-Semitism unless it's perceived to be some kind of a major crisis that's threatening to bring the country to a grinding halt or something like this. A lot of people are going to agree, a lot of critics are going to agree that the campaign to basically paint the Labour Party as having an anti-Semitic problem and to paint Jeremy Corbyn as being an anti-Semite or anybody else in the Labour Party was completely contrived and completely overinflated and done so in order to, well, it looks like weaken the Labour leadership, but also to divide the Labour Party conveniently into sort of separate camps, which is, that's what it's done. And also to drop Corbyn's approval ratings in the opinion polls as well. So a lot of people would agree with that analysis. In fact, a lot of mainstream journalists and politicians would agree that this was a contrived crisis. So what are they doing as a result of a contrived crisis? They're ramping up, still trying to ramp up the crisis.
Right.
And pouring resources at it and making this more of an issue. So it's quite puzzling how anybody could justify that based on something that no one can prove actually existed in the Labour Party.
Well, more British government resources go into this organisation, the Anti-Semitism Policy Trust, and they're getting another £100,000 to stem the spread of anti-Semitic material online, because this, of course, is one of the main problem areas, is the amount of critical material there is of Israel on Twitter and Facebook and so on. So, it's a small amount of money in this case, but nonetheless, it's one of many quantities of money that are being pushed out into these types of organizations. And again, Robert Jenrick in this case said, anti-Semitism has absolutely no place in our society, and I'm committed to tackling it at its root. Now, he didn't specify what its root is. What is the root of anti-Semitism in the UK? I'm not convinced that there is one.
It's such an arbitrary question, Mike, that an arbitrary question begs for what? arbitrary answers.
Yes.
So basically, it's anything you want it to be. Online extremism, conspiracy theories, racism, and so forth. So criticism of Israel, which has been successfully conflated in some quarters as anti-Semitism, which in itself doesn't actually make any sense logically or historically, but nonetheless, it's been conflated. So this is the problem when you make arbitrary terms that are elastic like this. Politicians love this because then they can sort of grab it and turn it into anything that they want and use it to also to put in on their resume as something that they're doing in terms of social justice.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely. Okay. Well, look, we have to leave it there for today. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for joining us, Patrick. We will be back at the same time, 1 p.m. as usual on Wednesday, and we'll see you then. Bye-bye.